Hello, I'm Darren Magee, and the topic for today's video comes from questions asking if I would outline some of the different kinds of physical abuse. Another question is if I would outline some of the hidden signs of physical abuse. Now, abuse of any kind is aimed at coercing and controlling others through manipulating, threatening, and disempowering them. And physical abuse often occurs alongside other kinds of abuse, such as financial, emotional, psychological, and I have made videos on different kinds of abuse if you want to check those out. Now, early on in relationships, abusers often test their victims. Now, they may pretend they were only being playful when they hurt them, or they may claim they only accidentally hurt the partner. But when they see what they can get away with, it begins to escalate. And quite commonly, because not all of the abuse is physical, there is often a cycle. Now, that cycle might begin with a threat, such as, I'm warning you, or don't you even think of, whatever that happens to be. And then comes the attack. Now, that could be a slap, a punch, a kick, whatever it is. But the victim is led to believe that they did something wrong. After all, they were warned. Then what can follow is an apology. It wasn't them, it was their temper, which the victim provoked. Perpetrators often blame their victims, or indeed something else, for their own behavior. It was the victim who triggered it. It wasn't them, it was the stress they're under, or it wasn't them, it was the alcohol. They just can't help themselves. Then they turn on the charm. They might be attentive, perform an act of kindness, and this reinforces the trauma bond. But in reality, even whenever victims comply, abusive relationships generally don't get any better. Things don't improve. When the abuser sees what they've got away with, they tend to ramp up the threat, sometimes even the violence. They gain more control, more dominance, and the abuse is, more often than not, it is dished out as if it's a punishment for the victim. And like I said a moment ago, the perpetrator might claim to be sorry, promise it won't happen again, until the next time. And that pattern can continue until it has been so normalized the abuser doesn't have to apologize anymore. The victim has to learn not to upset them, not to trigger them. And although present in all forms of abuse on some level, with physical abuse, I think what we often see is the sadistic side of abusers. Sadism is taking pleasure from the pain and misery of others. With physical abuse, what we often see is pleasure in inflicting pain and misery on others. They behave sadistically to dominate, control, and humiliate for their own gratification. Now, some common kinds of physical abuse could involve just physical assaults. Now, that could be slapping, punching, kicking, pushing, burning, even forcefully restraining. Other forms of physical abuse could involve using medication, either withholding it or giving the wrong doses. There could even be denying medical attention for injuries and illnesses. There could be withholding food or making someone eat food that they know will harm them, such as something the victim has an allergy to or something they've been told to avoid in their diet for medical reasons. Another form of physical abuse could be denying or disrupting someone's sleep. Now, this could be playing loud music or putting the television on whenever they're trying to sleep, or disrupting their sleep, waking them up, demanding a conversation, demanding they go do something for them. The victim isn't allowed to sleep without the abuser's permission. And after a while, the victims suffer from sleep deprivation. Then there could be blocking someone's exit, perhaps during an argument, so they can't leave the room. They are captive. But what can happen sometimes is if the victim does try to get past them, the abuser might lash out aggressively, claiming they were only defending themselves. Or as the victim tries to get past, the abuser claims that they were physically assaulted. There can also be invading someone's personal space. For instance, during a heated argument, they are right up in someone's face, screaming at them. Physical abuse can also involve the destruction of personal property. Now, that could be cutting clothes, breaking someone's personal possessions, damaging their cars. The abuser often feigns innocence. They gaslight the victim. It was like that when I got here. Or it's always been like that. Or there could be threats to destroy someone's property if they don't comply. There can also be harming or threats to physically harm someone else if the victim doesn't comply. There could also be threats to harm or get rid of the victim's pets. And lastly, there could be dangerous, risk taking behavior aimed at frightening and terrorizing. For instance, there could be reckless driving. The victim is in the passenger seat. They're helpless. They're terrified. There's nothing they can do. They can't get away. Or the victim is driving the car and they grab the steering wheel or start hitting them while they're trying to concentrate on the road. There are many different kinds of physical abuse. There are only a few examples. But what are the common signs that someone is being physically abused? Well, there is no one clear sign, but there are some possible indicators, and these would have two categories. Firstly, there would be physical indicators. Now, this could be someone using makeup or clothing to hide bruises, cuts, burns. There could be recurrent injuries where the person can't remember how that happened, or the explanations are inconsistent with the nature of the injury. Or someone could have various injuries present, but they are all at different stages of healing, indicating they happened at different times. Secondly, some possible behavioral patterns could include sudden changes in behavior whenever their abuser appears. There could be a fear to go home. Now, this might present itself as someone maybe trying to stay in work as long as possible, always volunteering for extra shifts, or staying as long as possible whenever they're visiting someone. They are reluctant to leave. Over a period of time, you could see changes in behavior such as enhanced passivity or becoming very irritable very quickly, but they withdraw, they don't speak their mind. They might become quite apprehensive, vigilant, experience intense anxiety and depression. They might even flinch at any kind of physical contact, even if someone just accidentally brushes against them. The victims might make excuses whenever people want to call round and see them. They keep putting it off, they're never available, it's never a good time. Or the abuser could refuse to allow anyone to see their victim alone. They must always be present. And being abused can affect many people in so many different ways. But the difference is, I think, with physical abuse is it has victims living in terror. And this terror can make it difficult for them to come forward. Many fear what might happen to them, to their kids, their families, those they care about, if the abuse were to be discovered. And this fear, which the perpetrator has instilled in them, allows the abuse to continue. I would also like to add that physical abuse could be inflicted on anyone, regardless of their background, their sex, their age, whatever. Now, I'm aware that a topic like this might bring up different things in viewers, but if you are or if you have been in an abusive relationship, I'd invite you to think about reaching out for advice, help, support. Many areas have domestic abuse helplines, organizations that can help. And I will add the details of just some organizations in the description of this video that might be able to help. Utilize every bit of support you can get. And thanks for watching.